thank you for the opportunity to get to talk today, and I've enjoyed the first two presentations. I've learned a lot, and some things that even as I get ready to do my presentation, I would probably incorporate things that I learned today. My name is Russ Parish. I'm based here and just outside of Tampa, Florida. I work for JLL Technologies, and you might say the corporate real estate world. How does that play into this? And you know, about 15 years ago, I got first involved in this industry. Before that, I was an electrician. I was in the Navy, got out, got into manufacturing, and the world of energy and sustainability opened a door into corporate real estate. And I've got to do a lot of cool things since then. One of the very interesting things, and my topic today is on optimizing building operations, right? And so that does center around building management systems. That does center around data. And a lot of other aspects. So what I do for JLL is I manage several of their technology platforms. I lead them globally, whether it be CMMS systems, procurement type groups, and things of that nature. And I have an extensive engineering background. But the cool part about getting to work with JLL, JLLT, is I get to straddle a number of fences. So being a corporate real estate, we're involved in just about every business you can think of. We're in healthcare. We're in, basic building management that you think of when you think of corporate real estate, data centers, pharmaceuticals, retail. I manage 700 different clients on one of my platforms, and they range from, a Wendy's franchise all the way up to companies with inside the Fortune 10. And so a little bit of everything in between. What that means is I've seen a lot of good things, I've seen a lot of bad things, and there's a lot of different ways to approach projects. And so what we're going to talk about today is kind of a holistic approach and things you need to think about as you're working through optimizing your building, using your building automation system. That's the wrong button. That's the right one. So we're going to kind of begin with laying the foundation, right? There's a project, there's something I need to do. I kind of treat this more programmatically. So there's a lot of things you need to be aware of, a lot of things you need to put in place to begin that. And so we're going to kind of figure out where we are in the life cycle, and then what's the solution. So we live in a digital age, and it's very exciting, and it's very rapidly changing. The cool thing about that as well is that not everybody's at the same point, and they don't do the same thing. So the digital world allows a great amount of flexibility, a great amount of freedom, but there's also standardization, as John was kind of alluding to with data, that we have to kind of adhere to. So again, in the JLL world, we get to do a little bit of all of that. And we have customers that are on different, various points in the journey as well on their own digitalization growth, digitalization, digital business. Buildings themselves, I keep looking back, I forgot this one was on, have evolved, right? And that's the other part is, we had disparate systems, everything, with information that it gave us, but it never was tied together, and there was operations and all of those. In the building management system world, you can do a lot of these functions and activities. Obviously, we came to the connected side where we have all of our systems tied together, they're communicating somewhat, and there's also information that's flowing. Now, again, John touched on the point that just because you have information and data doesn't mean it's useful. And that's still a lot of the same application. To all the way to the smart, interface buildings and operations, where now not only are we able to communicate, we're able to control, we're able to change, we're able to evolve and tie those together. So again, a lot of people are still in all three of those. They may be straddling the fence between one, two, or all three. And again, as we begin to talk about a programmatic approach, you need to begin to lay the foundation, but the foundation has to be such that where am I going to be a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? What is it that I really want to accomplish by doing whatever it is I'm about to do? And so the playing field, there's a ton of different things out there that provide us information that we could use. There's a ton of different players, all of them good, all of them with aspects that they bring to the table specific to their specific piece of equipment. But then you have to begin to tie those together. Again, this is where I'm starting from. And the aspect of I have a blank sheet of paper and I get to begin isn't usually there. If it is, that's the best time to do all of these activities, because you can lay out the way you want it to go, you can lay that foundation, and you've got the results exactly. You're going to have to overcome things based on the number of inputs that you're taking from, like I said, those disparate systems. And then we're going to talk a little bit, I'm going to do a little bit of a case study on a project we did with IntelliCommand. And it's a commissioning platform that we use. We've had a partnership for 4 or 5 years with them now, and it kind of builds on the machine learning, AI aspect, auto fault detection, and different aspects of that to actually optimize and get the peak performance out of your building and your systems. So it's very interesting. Why do we do it? All right, so I'll tell you right up front, I'm a reliability engineer by trade. So we're going to incorporate the maintenance and engineering aspects of this as part of our program. And as a reliability engineer, we want to do the right work at the right time, at the right cost, with the appropriate risk, right? That's the driving force behind sustainability, energy conversion, all of the things that we're kind of talking about and tying together in these systems. You're never going to get rid of all the risk unless you have very deep pockets. I've worked with a variety of clients and jobs in my career. I will tell you, one of my jobs was I got to run the data centers for the New York Stock Exchange. You would think they would invest everything they had and would have a perfect record. Well, no, they don't. And so there's always going to be some risk involved in what you do. This is a definition of world-class maintenance, and there's about 30 years of data behind this. The other thing is everybody kind of has their own definitions of what they're trying to achieve, but you need to define it. That goal needs to be out there, and it needs to be ever-changing as you continue to work through the process. The bottom line numbers there talk about being reactive versus proactive. And as you look at the companies you work with or the companies you go into or your company, how reactive are you to things? We talked about cybersecurity. There's a cybersecurity attack, everything about that's going to be reactive, even if you've got the best systems in the world in place. Having worked with people that have had ransomware attacks, the effect is immediate and the effect is long-term, right? So you lose work, you lose data, you lose things that you'll never be able to recover. Yet you have to build and recover as best you can, right? And that takes time, money, and effort. So in this case, they talk about reactive versus proactive, and it takes 3 times longer and costs you 4 to 10 times as much to do the same job. So your goal in this exercise is to shift as proactive as you can, just like mitigating that risk. Mitigate as much risk as you can. So these are things you need to be thinking about as you're laying out these programs. All right, I just like this slide, so that's why I included it. But technology projects, there's going to be 3 things you've got to do and you've got to do well and you've got to account for. One is the technology itself, right? You've got to understand the technology, both today, where you're starting from, and then what's still coming in the future. What's the art of the possible? I think probably one of the most key aspects is change management. You're going to undergo a change. You're going to have people do things different. You're going to have to look at things in another light. Change has to be managed and then effectively communicate. We talked, I think a little bit, maybe John and yours, you talked about information and how people use it and what the expectation is. Well, what the C-suite needs, what the operator needs, and what the maintenance guy needs are 3 different things. And you've got to be able to talk at each of those levels and make it so that they understand why it's important to them, but why it's also important to the holistic company view and things of that nature. I promise you, if you don't do these 3 things well, your project's not going to be as successful as it could be, right? It's only going to be as limited as the one you're worst in. From a maintenance standpoint, we're going to build on our maintenance systems. There's going to be maintenance involved in this process using the building management system and all the things we're talking about. This is one I'm very comfortable with. I've worked with the company for a number of years, and it's called the Uptime Elements. And it's evolved. It was created in 2010, and it's a framework. It's of what you need to accomplish. It doesn't tell you how you have to do it, but it kind of gives you the end goal of where you need to get to in a variety of areas. And you can see the topics. It's evolved, and in 2017 they added an asset management system, which ties very closely to the systems that are managed in the BMS. And in 2000, it took 17 they started it, but it got implemented in 20, is the digitalization sector. So now there's 6 domains that are included. And that center section, I think, is the most important. Well, it's important. It may not be the most important, but it's very high on there. But it kind of ties those two worlds together. How we're going to operate, how we're going to achieve. And it includes things like diversity and inclusion, sustainability. But then it also ties in the IoT side with the digital twin and the aspects that we're talking about as well today. So it's kind of, again, a holistic picture of how to bring this together. So you've got the information, you've got the systems that are working in the buildings, you've got your plans you put together, and then you've got your maintenance framework, that works all together. So what's the art of the possible? And I threw in one more slide, and I actually found this after I had done my presentation, and it's the Gartner Emerging Technical Impact Radar for 2023. And what's interesting about that to me is, one, that's the actual title, so if you go online, you can pull this up and read the article that went with it, is it kind of lays out where things are today, right? What are the things, what are the tools, what are the technologies that we drive today? But what's going to be hot in a year or from now, 3 years from now, 6 years from now? I'll be honest, there are things on this list, I have no idea what they are. So I've got to go back now and learn and begin to understand. And there's a lot of them there that we've talked about today. But the themes for 2023 are a smart world, productivity revolution, privacy and transparency, and critical enablers. So again, things we've talked about today, things that we interact with, on a day-to-day basis. So it's an interesting read if you have a few minutes. All right, so the example that I was going to give you for JLL, there's 3 things here. One is called next generation maintenance. That's our interpretation of the uptime elements and how we implement those. I told you I operate, some technologies for the company. One of the things that we do is I operate within JLL. That was good. JLL proper. But then I also get to sell to the direct market, and I operate in the direct market. And those are really 2 different worlds themselves. In JLL, we have very prescriptive processes, procedures that are followed, name standardization, attribute standardization, things like that. So all the things that go into our systems are the same. So 85% of the things we do at all of our customers, very prescriptive. Direct, very specific to the customer. I sometimes equate it and call it the Wild Wild West. This example is in JLL. So we have those standards and things behind us, but we have a complete maintenance program from those standards all the way up to how you maintain equipment. In telecommand, we talked a little bit about earlier, but that's where we begin to take information and really optimize, whether it's real-time optimization, whether it's asset intelligence or machine learning. All these aspects begin to flow with the data like John was talking about earlier. And then Corrigo, which is our CMMS system, work management and things like that. So again, we tie all 3 of these together to operate the machines. So the customer we were working with was kind of looking for some specific things. Everything was smart BMS technology related as the RFP came out, or not the RFP, but the project scope. They wanted to be able to analyze equipment performance and detect issues. They wanted to easily be able to implement it at a site. The first application here was at a single site with, based on the results of that, a larger scope of project that would follow. They wanted savings on their O&M cost. They wanted to make sure they had global capability, and they wanted to be able to deliver other savings. So pretty standard stuff for an operating platform. Overall, what the project can bring touches on more than just that, right? Safety, maintenance, labor and maintenance kind of combined. Data we talked about, and I'm not gonna, I probably had more data conversation in this, but following the last presentation, I'm gonna say that's the gold standard and where we need to get to. But data is important. Overall knowledge, the vendor side of the house. That's something that gets excluded a lot of the time. But a lot of companies have to make a decision. Are they going to have a technical force internal, or are they going to farm it out? So self-perform versus vendor perform. There's a cost associated with each one. One is more expensive than the other. So again, it depends on your model. And then energy. Everything around us will drive to energy savings. Will drive to, driving towards net neutral carbon consumption, and a lot of the goals, your corporate social responsibility aspects as well. So you can begin to tie together many aspects of your day-to-day business operations as well as your long-term deliverables. So where we start from today, you're always going to have a starting point, whether it's, like I said, that blank sheet of paper, or you've been operating for 25 years and you've got a lot of things to overcome. But mostly what we find is people still do frequency-based maintenance, at least partially, if not all of it. They're capturing running hours, maybe, and it's demand-based. And we want to get to, like I said, that proactive part, not the reactive part. So we want to get to predictive technologies. We want to be incorporating more and more of the uses in our BMS system. And what we find, both with BMS systems and CMS systems when we go in, people pay a lot of money for these systems, yet they never use the full capability. There's always aspects that are available to them. They don't need to use every aspect of the system, but I've never worked with a customer that couldn't use more of what they were already paying for and achieve a benefit from it. That's a key thing when you can talk to that's when you start talking about optimizing how they use it. When you can convince them that they can unlock potential in those systems that they hadn't done before. And then you see where we want to get to, the predictive. Again, a lot of the same things we've talked about. So in the IntelliCommand aspect and the account we were working on with those goals they had set up, it's really around detecting issues before they become issues. And it's about getting better at doing that, getting the information, getting the data, and then beginning to refine how you operate the equipment. And you can see there's 4 models there or 4 types that we look at. Run rule-based analytics. We put in a set of criteria and we operate to that criteria. We have, the cool thing about that is you can automate work orders within Corrigo, right? So the machine is telling me, hey, I need you to look at me. There's a problem, or there could be a problem. That's a cool aspect. We also have where you can interface with people looking at reports and work with the data and do the same thing. How many people have like predictive technologies? We do oil analysis, we do vibration analysis, whatever the case may be. We get these great reports with these great actions we take, and it's either digitally loaded and never looked at, put in a book on the shelf. This gives you that area where you can continue to build on that data, right? And continue to have that aspect front and center. The coolest one is the last one, which talks about real-time optimization, where it can physically make changes to the BMS system as it gains and understands and learns more about your system. That's when the world gets really cool. You don't need any interface. Now, most of the people I work with still want to maintain some controls. They're not quite ready to give up everything to a machine yet, if you will, or to a software. But we do that more and more, right? And so again, this is advancing quickly. Not only, it's not the art of the possible anymore, it's the art of the reality. We can do that. A couple of other things you can begin now, again, as you get more and more data, more and more information, this is where you begin to build machine learning and AI, and it's really like a snowball effect, right? So you've done all these other things to build the foundation. You've now got your systems aligned. Now we're beginning to look at the next steps. How can we continue to improve day by day, shift by shift, whatever the case may be? A couple of examples there. One, I don't have that, but in the top right-hand corner is what's known as the probability of failure curve. And reliability engineer here. But the probability of failure curve starts at installation, right? Funny thing is, one of the times that a higher percentage of the time equipment fails or has a fault right after installation. It's human induced, right? We didn't do something exactly right. But what this curve shows us is that once we put a piece of equipment or an asset in play in the system, over time it's going to degrade. It's going to change. Our operation is going to change. But what is it that we want out of an asset, right? We want an asset to deliver what we want it to deliver when we need it to. I don't need it to do it 100% of the time most times, right? And that started way back when the airline industries in the late 70s, early 80s, when they were having a ton of equipment failures. You know, what's an acceptable equipment failure when you're in an airplane? I guess it depends if you're on the plane, right? But 99.9 is good. But that 0.1, what is the impact of it? And what this curve begins to show is you can actually begin to see the performance of a piece of equipment or an asset fade off, and you can tell when it's getting close to failure. You can take actions appropriately to mitigate that failure or make the decision to run to failure and things like that. So that's what the curve is depicting. Some of the RTOs or real-time optimizations, again, very much like the BMS system, right? You can do a lot of these things in there, but it's actually updating it. It's making changes, you're improving. Like I said, I started out at JLL, or excuse me, in the corporate real estate. I worked for one of their competitors early on, but I started in the energy and sustainability sector. And this was a few years back, so not quite as sophisticated as we are now. But one of the things we would always do when we were going into a customer is we would put sensors in the building. We would look at lighting and humidity and temperature controls, right? Because what we always found is there was a perception and there was a reality of what was occurring. They had building management systems and things like that. Again, not using it necessarily to the extent. So they would tell us how they ran their buildings. And then we would come and show the data of how the building was actually operating, right? And like I said, they didn't usually line up. The other thing, much like the what Stuart showed with the lights on the building and the cyber attacks, was I would usually fly in, either the night before and take a picture, or if I was there for 2 days, take a picture of the building about 7, 8 o'clock at night when it was dark and most of the people were gone. And they would tell me how their lighting was working, and 60% of the lights would be on in the building with 10% of the people there. So these are the kind of things that it can continually update, right? And so there's a cost savings associated with that, and that's what's showing here for an air handling unit. Now the maintenance part, okay? So as we begin to look at the operation, it opens up, a lot of opportunity. And I'll just read the kind of the results, but we're looking at, whether we can do inspection. Well, any number of things we can do to improve the overall maintenance performance. So 48% of the tasks in this particular instance were moved to condition-based. 29, I love this term, tasks will remain a traditional intrusive PM activity, but now it's auto-generated, right? I still need to go in and do something. I need to replace a belt. I need to replace a filter, so I've got to break into that machine. But we still have to do that, but we're not doing it every 3 months. The other thing we would find is, again, people operate equipment the same. I live in Tampa, and you have a rooftop unit in Tampa, you don't need to maintain it the same way a rooftop building or rooftop unit is in New York or Minnesota, right? There's differences, yet you go in and everybody looks at them quarterly, right? So 23% of the tasks are eliminated. Okay, you don't have to do it. And there's the benefits line up to the point we talked about earlier with the opportunities. So proof's in the pudding, right? This particular pilot was net to save about $240,000 with $76,000 in cost. We're waiting, we haven't quite got the 12 months of data yet to say definitively everything is what it is. What I will tell you is the savings are higher. The costs are a little bit higher too, and there were some reasons for that. We found some things they weren't doing that they in turn needed to invest in. But as soon as we get that, we'll publish those as well. But very positive, less than a year return on investment in these cases. And now it's something we can expand through their entire portfolio. And that's it. I do have a few others. I don't know if presentations get sent out after the conference, but if they do, there's some more detailed slides after this that kind of show different aspects of, some of the savings opportunities. Okay. Okay, that's it.